Okay, Kathy, would you be willing to lead us in an opening prayer?
I'd love to.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Let us pray. A thanksgiving for gardens. God of grace, in the story of creation, you made the earth a garden and entrusted it to us to till and to keep, a place of peace and beauty where we could walk with you. In the story of redemption, the one who died for us was buried in a garden, and there you raised him up to greet us with new hope and risen life. In the story of the church, you tend us as a garden, a place of careful pruning and abundant harvest, where we can work with you. Meet us, we pray, in all the gardens where we go for nourishment, refreshment, and prayer. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
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 Thank you for that. And Edie Weller, who will offer our closing prayer today, did a lot of work to find all of the prayers that we are going to pray together this week and next week as well. And so we will find a way to share those as well with the larger group. So, all right. So welcome to this first two-part series on the integration of spiritual practices and creation care. I think many of you know that St. Mark's as a cathedral community and as a faith community has a number of spiritual practices that it has outlined as we each and together live and move and have our being as we encounter God and ask for God's presence and transforming power in each one of our lives. Some of those spiritual practices, as are stated in the strategic plan and on the website and have been communicated in many ways in sermons and other formation activities, include things like, these will not be surprises to you, daily prayer and weekly worship, and the practice of rest, so Sabbath, so taking some kind of regular Sabbath, and pilgrimage. And one of the other spiritual practices that is outlined and that we all practice together with each other is the practice of giving and receiving generously. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the practice of generosity and its intersection with creation care. And we all know that in the fall, normally, I'm looking out my window going, well, this is not a typical day, but normally in September, we get these just amazing days when gardens are just bursting with the fruit of the earth, with the harvest that the earth gives to us. And it is this way for us to each recognize that where we live is this incredible offering, and the earth itself offers us this great generosity that we then turn around and share with each other.
Okay, honey.
And so, and Kathy, I see you on, and I'm going to put you on mute for just a minute.
Shut up, Kathy.
And so what we're going to do is over the next hour-ish, we're going to hear from four, because we've got a couple and then two others, from four amazing people who have stories to share about how their own practice of generosity and their gardens are integral to their lives as they encounter God. And so we have Keiko Mariorama and Jaime Rubio, who are going to share just a little bit about their practice in the Leffler Garden of rehabilitating and rebuilding that garden. Carolyn Blount is going to talk a little bit about her time in pea patches. And I've heard she has a lot of awesome stories about things that happen in pea patches. And then Rob Reed is going to share about his experience working on the roof of St. Mark's, on the roof of Cathedral House, where he has a hive of bees that has the best view of any beehive group anywhere in the country. It must be on top of St. Mark's. And as we go through that conversation, Lisa Gramlich, who is so deeply thought of in the entire country, is going to help facilitate that conversation with them. I think many of you know that Lisa is the Dean of the College of the Environment at the University of Washington and has been there in that role for about 10 years and just brings this wealth of knowledge and just a deep graciousness and gratitude appreciated in her work and her offering in that space. And so we are delighted that she is with us today. Okay, so before we get started, I want to invite each one of you guys to reflect on a question, and we're going to do just a little bit of sharing with the whole group as a way of kind of warming up. So I want you guys to think about a time in the last week-ish when you have been surprised in a good way. And if you would be willing, we'll ask a couple of people to share what that is. So think a little bit about that question. And then when you are ready to share, unmute yourself and share it out with everybody. And I'm happy to start. So mine actually is a good way of integrating these two things together. So I had a tomato sandwich for the first time in my life on Monday. Now, I normally have sandwiches that have tomatoes and a whole bunch of other things, but somebody who many of us know at St. Mark's gave me a couple of the most amazing tomatoes from her garden. And when I felt this one tomato, I'm like, okay, it's perfectly ripe. And I'm going to cut it up and have it on a sandwich. And I was so incredibly delighted because it was actually one of the best sandwiches and one of the most simple sandwiches that I have had in such a long time. And so her generosity by giving me a tomato and a couple of other tomatoes helped me discover this thing that I did not know existed, the simple pleasure of a tomato sandwich. And so now I long to have tomato sandwiches every day when I can. So that is my sharing.
Oh my. Good share, Wood.
So I'll go. So the tomatoes, speaking of, I think a couple weeks ago, I opened my door to discover that a neighbor had left me a whole carton full of different sizes and colors of large cherry tomatoes and also one large heirloom tomato. And I've been dying to have fresh tomatoes all summer because I was never able to buy the plants to get them started just for various reasons. So I've been buying them at the store, but it's so much better to get them from someone else's gardens. And it was just totally generous of them. And so that's my example.
Well, mine was kind of a negative, positive sort of thing. On Tuesday, I was to give a shared screen lecture here at Mirabella. And I had never shared a screen before. The whole thing just fell apart. We actually had to abort it. My computer stopped forwarding and all kinds of things. It was really a rather humbling experience, but it was a program that I've kind of started here and have residents lecture once a month. We had a gap, that's why I was doing it myself. I got 25, 35, I don't know how many emails from other people that were so sweet, so kind, so supportive. Anyway, it turned out to not be such a bad experience. I just jumped on and I'll do it again another time. And believe me, I've been having people show me how to use Zoom better than I knew how to use it, obviously. So anyway, get back up and try to write again. And it turned out to be good. And other people were very generous and loving.
Well, as another Carolyn,
yes,
I will speak up. I inadvertently learned that the block away from me was having a neighborhood gathering last night. And I only learned that because I walked down the street with my mask and everything to talk with my neighbor who's doing Japanese Zen gardens. And he said, "Are you going to a neighborhood gathering tonight?" And I said, "Well, what gathering?" So I walked down there with my N95 mask on. There were probably, 30 people out there. And a woman I don't know at all, she lives up in the next block from me, handed me what she'd been giving everybody, which was a lovely sack of little apples. So I was so surprised by this, and I sort of said, "Well, what kind are they?"
Like,
How's that for being unappreciative? And it turned out that she had an espaliered apple tree on one of their walls, and there were 4 different varieties. So I'm going to be surprised by the different flavors that the apples have.
oh, nice.
All right, how about if we get one more person to share, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, I'll share. I have been, like many people, working on my garden, and I have a bird bath and I have a bird feeder. And I've also had for a number of years, you know, the one that's supposed to bring the chickadees, that's red, and you have the fruit on it, the fruit red juice. And never has a hummingbird come in the many years, and every year I faithfully clean it and change the water. And this week, a hummingbird actually came, and I don't know whether he got any water, but he was certainly chirping around there. And it was just sort of like faithfulness, faithful. You know, if you're faithful and tend, you know, maybe, you know, it shows up. You know, so it was a great pleasure.
Lovely.
Well, thank you all. Those are lovely, lovely stories. And it's nice to know that we are all discovering so many new things in the midst of this odd time in which we find ourselves, including the fact that hummingbirds will come and be seen in places that they are not accustomed to being seen in. So, all right, Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Christy, thank you so much. And just to sort of check in on run of show, as they say, I've got my 4 panelists. And believe me, we have not over-rehearsed this. Would you agree, panelists? So what you're going to see is spontaneity versus a lot of stagecraft here. But we're going to go on, the 5 of us, mostly the 4 of them, for about 20, 25 minutes. And then we're going to go to the infamous Zoom breakout groups. And Christy's going to give you another assignment. So here we go. My dear panelists, welcome. Thank you. And the first question I have, and no particular order, so get ready to either jump up or sort of look the other way, is tell me about your garden or your favorite plant. Who wants to go first? And you're going to have to unmute yourself unless you're... Carolyn, you're unmuted. Do you want to tell us about your garden? Because I don't know that everybody knows quite
What a pea patch is even, maybe.
what you're infamous for.
I don't know what I'm infamous for, but anyway. We moved to Mirabella 11 years ago. So we've been here a while, and we had Dick, my husband, had put his name on the pea patch list before we moved in. We'd always had a garden, and I grew up on 100 acres, so gardened all my life. But the garden here was really more Dick's, and I did other things at Mirabella. But he died now, it was 8 years ago. And a friend, a very good friend, said, "Are you keeping the pea patch in memory of Dick, or are you doing it because you want to yourself?" And I had to tell her I didn't really know. But it seemed important to me to keep the garden, and I've done that. But a pea patch garden, ours is the Cascade, and it's only 10 by 10 feet, so it's really quite small. Mine has lots of things in it, and it's not as neat as other people's because I have both flowers and vegetables and lots of things. I go over about every other day during the summertime. And I have raspberries and blueberries and rhubarb and snowdrops, and of course calendulas come up every place. And then things that I plant each year, like kale. This is the year of kale and tomatoes, but all kinds of greens. I really like the lettuce things, but I had beets and carrots this year as well. And so much kale, I've given it away to everybody. And two other things quickly, and then I'll get off. I love the garden because it's the most diverse group to which I belong. There are people of all ages and all races, and that is really quite wonderful. And there are animals in the garden. And last summer, a peregrine falcon watched me, and I watched it for at least 15 minutes while it sat on the grape arbor. There are just wonderful surprises like that all the time.
Mm.
So it's a
I love
wonderful
that,
space.
Carolyn. Thank you.
Well, I can tell a story about a favorite plant. I went outside one morning and the neighbor said, "Hey, we're going down the street. We're going to dig up plants where they tore this house down." And I thought, well, okay, maybe I should go see. Maybe there'd be something interesting to get down there. So we went down the street and there's a lot of things growing. Some of the things looked somewhat familiar to me, but my neighbor said, "Rob, you need to get rid of those two plants in your front yard. They don't look good." And we have a pretty good relationship, so it was okay. I said, "You're right. They don't look very good." That plant you see right over there, there's a lot of saplings. Dig up a couple of those and put those in and let's see what happens. So I said, "Well, what is that?" She says, "I don't know what that is." And I didn't know what it was either. So I dug 2 or 3 of them up. I brought them home. I planted them. I took out whatever it was I was trying to grow. I can't remember what it was. I pulled that out. And I put these 2 plants in. And pretty quick, I realized, wow, I think they're going to take. You know, they started to perk up. I didn't know if they'd passed the test from transplanting them. So after a period of time, in fact, it might have been the next spring, there was enough to identify the plant, and I took it to the CUH, Center for Urban Horticulture, has somebody there that has identified many plants for me. And she said, "That is a Clerodendron trichotomum." And of course, that didn't mean anything to me or hardly anybody else, but sometimes people like to hear what the technical name is. But she said, otherwise known as a Harlequin glorybower. And I thought, wow, what an unusual name. Well, it sounds very exotic. And so I then found fairly quickly, there was 3 things about this plant that were quite remarkable, is that eventually it developed a little white flower like that had a fragrance to it. I thought, oh, great, this is a plus for a start. And then I saw, I think it might have been Eliza Davidson, who is a arborist. She knew the plant. And she said, "You know, that's also called a peanut butter tree." And I said, "No, I didn't know that." She said, "Go home and rub the leaf with your finger." So I went home, rubbed the leaf. Sure enough, now I tell, like, it's fun to see kids try this. You know, peanut butter, they're gonna like that. And adults like the experience of that too. So that was like the second thing about this plant that's remarkable. Then it turns out this white flower that comes out in the beginning of the summer drops off, and then a third fruit develops, which opens up into a 5-petal star with a blue berry in the middle of it. And that's the fruit. And it's like seeing a whole second flower, totally different than that white flower. And I thought, wow, this tree is miraculous. So that's the story of that peanut butter tree.
What does the fruit taste like? Does it taste like peanut butter?
I haven't tasted it. I read someplace it more or less is non-edible, but I've also read that you could eat it, but I haven't tried it. Sometimes I'm brave about that, but it's really small. The little fruit is like the size of a pea.
Uh-huh.
And so I think the comment was, well, it's edible, but you'd have to get so many of them to have any quantity of it. So I don't think it's particularly tasty from what I've read. So,
Rob, that's wonderful. Rob has made me wait all week. He showed me a picture, but he would not tell me the story. So that was worth the wait, Rob.
well,
So Keiko and Jaime, do you have a garden, as I understand it, that is particularly close and that you're fond of?
Well, I think for me, what I like about the garden is actually doing the gardening from the just basically, what is that, like a blank sheet of the property to
Uh-huh.
make it something new. So I think I enjoy most was the planning. So, so it's not exactly a plant, but it's okay. I just want to go ahead and talk about the garden what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So we started working at the garden in February this year. And it was so enjoyable for brainstorming and then placements of the garden boxes and where that plant's supposed to go, like making the maps of the plants. That was most of the things that I really enjoyed. And Jaime was very excited to help me with my projects with his handy skills, making the garden boxes and so forth. And the purpose that we started to do the gardening there was because we were inspired at Noel House. By volunteering at the Noel's House, which is the homeless women's shelter at St. Mark's last year, Jaime and I saw the faces of homelessness and then learned that ladies loved fresh vegetables and soup. And it is apparent that it is important to have for them to have a healthy food options. And we thought it would be great if we can build the garden and have some fresh fruits or fresh vegetables to provide for them. And we appreciated Dean Steves for trusting us to try our ideas freely. He did not ask anything in details, but he just let us use that space. And we appreciate that very much. Let's see, what did I say? And it became my personal play area to experiment with the new plants such as winter squash and onions, new methods of growing healthy vegetables, which I collected a lot of things in the Pinterest board. If anyone uses the Pinterest, it's very addictive, and experience the power of the nature. And for Jaime,
I like it. I like the vegetables. I have to say, I'm not really very detail oriented about gardening. I never really thought much about gardening, but Keiko is very passionate, like incredibly passionate. And from her, I've been learning a lot about plants and how, you know, the way you treat it, the way you plant it it is gardening. Before she started doing gardening, for me gardening is okay, you have a pretty plant there and you know it's pretty and it's nice, but what is behind that, you know, the commitment that you have to be involved, you know, how you have to develop some knowledge in order to grow a successful garden. And it is quite interesting to learn and be able to help. For me, about the garden is more about what I can use my knowledge, you know, as I can build things, I can help with that, and obviously I have the muscle, so carrying all those bags of soils is quite a bit intense work. I really, you know, what she said about Noel House, that we volunteer and we can see the people, and we always say how fortunate we are to be where we are right now. And it's not ideal. We really never thought that it's going to be like this, but you know, we see the necessity that is up there. And I think part of our duties is to, you know, to provide and see how we can make ourselves useful for people that need it, because it's always going to be there and they always need someone. And you know, yeah, if we can do at least a little, that make a difference.
Yeah, Keiko and Jaime, I love how you started to really connect the physical act of gardening with, in this case, you know, the ministry associated with Noel House and the little care and feeding of people that have less. I would love to hear from some of the other panelists about this question of how the act of gardening or beekeeping, as it may be the case, makes you feel closer to God? You know, to what degree is it a spiritual practice, or is it part of your personal ministry? And how does it connect to this question that Christy laid out about how our spirituality and our love of gardening and food and sharing all connect for you personally? And Carolyn, can I go back to you first?
Sure. Oh, I think it is a spiritual practice, although I think I hadn't thought about that until you broached that question. But sometimes I have to talk myself into going over. Maybe I'm just, it's not that far. It's only a 3-block walk, but maybe I'm just feeling lazy that day. And inevitably, when I get there, I can just feel myself calming down and getting into the dirt. The soil in our particular plot was very poor when we moved in, but the Pea Patch Park Department brings some compost and things that we can use. You can't put any commercial fertilizers in it. And so the soil is now quite good over the years, and I can still spade it up and haul things in it, and that makes me feel good. And then a garden is generosity in itself, because you never know what year is going to produce what things in such great abundance. And so here on our group email, I can also give things to the food bank, which I do, but I can just put out a little note and say, I've got kale on my shelf, come and get it. And you know, in 15 minutes, the kale is all gone. And so I can give something away every day, and that's fun. And this was, I don't know that you can see it, but this was just today's pick of cherry tomatoes. And I've already given some away. So those are some of the ways that a garden, and I think anytime I'm there, I sort of thank God for this wonderful opportunity. So it
Carolyn,
calms me
thank
down
you.
considerably.
Rob, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah. When you bring up God and my relationship with God, that's still pretty unclear to me. That's a lifelong process, I guess. But what I do recognize is I'm seeing miracles all the time. And some people maybe think, oh, you know, these are not miracles, but to me they are. It's like, how does a little tiny seed turn into so many different things? I mean, the thing about the mustard seed, that mustard seed is really small. It's like a speck of pepper, and the seed will grow, and it has the knowledge of a huge computer, something to do all the things that it does to grow. But I do want to make mention of something on a different note, is that we haven't talked about the bees. Right. And both Jaime and Keiko have been very helpful with working with the bees. They're there, they're able to check on them on a regular basis, and have made some interesting discoveries about our bees. We have 2 hives. One of the hives is full of bees, and I was a little concerned, thinking I got to make some more room for them, or they're gonna say it's too crowded and swarm, which is what happens sometimes. But they're doing great now. It's got one of the hives, both hives have a lot of honey. One hive, really a lot of honey. And I don't know if you know this or not, but honey is really heavy. And we can tell that there's a lot of honey in there. All you have to do is lift up one side of the box that they're in, and it's like, whoa, it feels like there's a lead weight in there. And it's because of the honey being so heavy. And finally, I want to say, getting back to the miracle aspect, if you take some honeycomb and look at how perfect, that just blows me away. They're like little 6-sided cells that look like they were stamped by a computer-controlled device. And the bees don't have tools. They make these perfectly hexagonal shapes, and they make big clusters of them. And how does this happen? That's a miracle.
So I, as panelist, have the responsibility of watching the time. So Keiko and Jaime, you're going to have the last chance to speak. And if in just a couple of minutes, you could say, for you, how does this connect with your spirituality, your ideas about God, the divine, miracles, however you want to take that question.
Okay, I think about, I think I will talk about the one kind of miracles. I have a love and hate relationship with the rabbit because they are mercilessly eat my plants. And so I was like, "Urgh," but then what can I do? And one night, I was doing the gardening at 9:30 p.m. and I hear a sound, crunch, crunch, crunch. Like, oh, that's my rabbit. So I was just looking at the rabbit looking at me, oh, crunch, crunch my plants. And I was just like, started to see, what can I do? And I hear the sound, whoosh, whoosh. And that was a giant owl right above the carriage house. And it's coming down to the rabbit. He didn't catch the rabbit, but I just saw the moment where, wow, there's a nature has a balance and a circle of the nature, all the lives from the beginning to the end. It could be cruel, but at the same time, there is a balance that I am part of it. And I have the responsibility not to break those balance, which as a human, we tend to break a lot of things without knowing, but I really appreciated those moments that I've been educated by them. And I think it is important to carry on to our next generation, which Yoshi often be with me and he get to see that and they're learning. So that's my appreciation to the nature and being a gardening. And that's part of my meditation too.
Wow. So panelists, thank you for your wonder and your wisdom and all of your good work. And with that, I am going to send it back to Christy, who will lead us in the next phase of the evening. But thank you, panelists. That was beautiful.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you guys for all of the wisdom that you have shared with us and the images and the stories. So what I'm going to do now is, I hope this is going to work. So in chat, I have shared with everybody questions. A couple of these questions are going to sound very familiar because they are questions that Lisa has asked our esteemed panelists to share. And then there is a third question about what the last 6 months has been like in your practice of generosity and gardening. So we're going to send you all to breakout sessions, and for maybe 20 minutes or so as a group, and they're going to be about 4 of you in each one of the groups, or four or five people in each one of the groups. Pick 1 or 2 of these questions as a group to share about, and think about the question that really kind of stirs within you. And then take a little bit of time of sharing with each other what has moved you as you think about gardening and the practice of generosity, and how those 2 things are intertwined and a part of your spiritual practice. All right, so I'm going to send everybody off to breakout rooms, and then I will, I think, give you guys about a 2-minute warning, and then we'll come back and do a little bit of sharing, and then talk about some resources, and then it will be 8:30. All right, have fun, everybody. Okay, so this is your Zoom host who must apologize to all of you. I intended to send you all a note saying that we were going to end in like 2 minutes, and I pushed the wrong button. So, so I know I got everybody off in the middle of really good stories, and I'm sorry about that. Next time we will do better. All right, so Kylie, I am going to turn it over to you to invite people to do some sharing about what they learned, and then to take it away for the rest of the time.
Excellent. I can't believe we're already here. So thank you so much, Christy and everybody. What an incredible share out from everyone. It's wonderful to be learning so much from all of you all. So I'm going to share my screen because I'd like to show you a document. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Share, optimize everything. Here we go. Okay, so I want to show you this document that the Spiritual Practices Group has created. What you're looking at is a resource document that can help you, like it says, read, learn, act, invest, connect, and reflect with creation in creation as a spiritual practice. So you'll see we've got some columns going on. We've got some different sections. This section shows read. And the columns you'll follow as kind of a what, a where, and a why. And so I'm moving my cursor here so you can see what I'm talking about. So this first row, as an example, shows native plants, Pacific Northwest. If you click on that, it'll navigate you to a website that is a library of information in terms of native plants of the Pacific Northwest. And so you can learn about the region of plants in that area. So this whole entire document will show you resources in that regard. So here below, you'll see we have the Bible as a resource to read, and that little URL, if you will navigate you to specific passages that are themed with caring for the environment. So it's a really beautiful document that we will actually be sharing out with everybody afterwards that you can use as a guide. So that's just one section focusing on what you can read. We also have this section on areas where you can learn more. So for example, the TILF Alliance, we've got a URL for that where you can learn more about that. And that's local to Seattle. We've got a section where you can choose to act. So you can participate in a P-Patch, find a P-Patch in Seattle. You can get food delivery, produce delivery from Full Circle Farms. There is a floral, a florist basically that is all, they use sustainable practices. So lots of really great resources here that we've brainstormed and put together where you can invest, where you can take these actions to connect with organizations around Seattle, around the area, and also a section where you can reflect. So some more Bible verses specifically and other resources for prayers and books and such. So I'm actually going to leave this up for a moment while I say a few words because it'll be helpful in the activity that we're going to do. We're going to continue to share out a little bit, but to kind of recap, celebrating the harvest, as we've been discussing, as a spiritual practice is in any number of ways a form of worship, a form of prayer, a form of honoring our stewardship and honoring God and all of God's creation. In whatever actions we choose to do, we can bring these to an elevated level of consciousness or spiritual practice within ourselves and potentially those around us. So much of what we do individually ties into the community at large, is a lot of the things that we were discussing in our groups and in our breakout groups. All of this gives us a great opportunity to ask ourselves questions like, in what ways can I be a part of caring for creation? What do these practices mean to me in the current context? And also, where do I find hope? Which I think is so important to maintain hope in the process of caring for creation and finding a spiritual practice in it. So I ask that each of you, during and after the session is over, to come up with 3 actions based on what you learned or heard tonight or something from this resource list, which is why left it up as well, that you're going to tackle or work on. So think about what you're drawn to. Right now, though, we'd love to hear from a couple of people who would be open to sharing one action or you are willing to take, one action you're willing to take, or one thing that gives you hope. If you prefer, feel free to put your ideas into the chat. And if you haven't had an opportunity yet to say something, now may be a great time to share your ideas with the group. So what I will do is, hopefully you've got some great ideas. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everybody. If anybody wants to share an idea of how you're going to take action, or one thing that gives you hope, or where you find hope, that would be wonderful. So I'll just open it up to you all.
I want to know if you're going to be recording this, and that the action that I would take is to send, I know my daughter wanted to hear what her dad had to say, for one, but there's some other people that I would want to send to this link. Yeah, thank you. So where will it be? It will be posted then somewhere.
Yeah. Marks, I think.
Great.
Yes, we will. Christy.
Yes, we are going to post it, and I'm not sure where yet. So it will either be on the Creation Care site, or it'll be somewhere on the one of the Faith Formation websites. I also have everybody's, I think I have everybody's email, and so we will also send out, once we know where it is, where the video is posted, we'll send that out, and we will send the link to this awesome document out as well. So
that's great. And I know this is an E word that we don't say very often as Episcopalians, but this is sort of my version of evangelism. You know, I just think this is most anyone, it would be accessible to most anyone, which I love. Thank you.
Awesome.
I think that's such a great example. Does anybody else have something to share?
One of the things that was really inspiring about our group conversation, Carolyn mentioned this idea of dormancy as a way of future growth. And we talked about that practice. Like for me, is it related to like deadheading roses, or, you know, other areas that you have to remove something in order to be able to have growth, and or then have a period of like rest before you can do more. And so we thought about that and wondered about that as a group, as that relates to this time of pandemic and just so many of the changes going on, and that we have almost this time of dormancy and a kind of a new revelation of what is dead to us that we may not have seen before. And that, and even though in its dark sounding way, like gave me like hope, and really thinking about having new eyes of looking at what could be removed or available for pause as we think about returning to a different view of things. And so I was really grateful for Carolyn's perspective on that.
I think actually somebody else said the word dormancy first, and I followed by a spring, but now I'm not sure who mentioned it.
Well, you're right. It was Carolyn, just the other Carolyn.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Credit where it's due then.
Yes, Carolyn squared.
I would just, as a bit of advocacy, we have, through these last 6 months or so, really become aware of so many of the inequities that are present among us. And one of them has been food deserts. And I would just like to plant that as a seed, you know, for future advocacy, for future prayer, to think about areas of our city to which people do not really have accessible, less expensive, healthy food. and how that might be somehow addressed. That's a challenge, I guess, of advocacy.
But that's a great opportunity for an area to take action if we research that information for where those areas are and try to tackle them. That's great.
This is Lisa. I'm going to raise my hand. Although it's hard following Carolyn, that's such a wonderfully profound suggestion. This is a little more trivial. Rob, you really got me thinking a lot about bees and honey. And true confession, we eat a lot of honey, and I tend to just like go to the grocery store and I get some sort of big thing of honey that comes from who knows where. Usually has like a little teddy bear, you know, like, and I sort of think like, I do a lot of like local shopping for produce, and I always think of honey as just like it's in that plastic bear. So you're inspiring me to shop more locally for honey, knowing that then the beekeepers are keeping pollinators going and are, you know, sort of it's. I'm going to consider eating honey a divine spiritual practice.
You can find honey at farmers markets. That's you've probably seen it from local people. In fact, I go to meetings for, which aren't happening now, of course, for the beekeepers in the state of Washington, WSBA. And I went to the farmers market in the university, and there was this couple that comes to these meetings. And so I had came up to them and said, I recognize you from being at the bee meeting. So, and they were selling honey.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nice to get something from somebody local. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And if you have any resources like that, feel free to put them in the chat as well, because we'd love to share those out with everybody too.
We haven't talked about saving seeds, and I always let one of each plants go and save the seeds for next year.
Yeah, I would like to say to that too. I think one of my neighborhood in the shoreline, they have the sea saving, like it's what is that called? Like it's not free pantry, but those are sea pantries. So that everybody collect the seeds and they package it, and then so that everybody can share the seeds for the next year. And those are a wonderful way to, I think, share the produce for the future, because a lot of the vegetables they can do with just regular small planters, and they can grow the lettuce or, you know, something simple. And I think those would be a great inspiration for the youth or someone who doesn't, you know, have to spend money to start the gardening.
I want to offer that we have onion seeds that we've collected this year and would love to share them with people in this group. And we've enjoyed eating the onions. We thought it was going to be there were going to be too many onions, but actually we've almost gone through them all now, but we do have some seeds to share for anybody that's interested. And it would be really cool for us to share them with you, with whoever's open to that. Also, I wanted to offer that we go and we visit the girls and I, you know, Heather and Erica, my daughters, they're 13 and 15. They really enjoyed going to a farm that's nearby in the Issaquah, Renton Highlands. And I shared the story with the other people in my group about us witnessing a bee swarm when we were there, because they are beekeepers, and how profound that experience was for all of us and memorable. It's really marked for me. It's my COVID-19 moment that it really was marked for me. And I thought, that's Lisa, about your comment about wanting to experience honey as a sacred practice. And I think it would be great to have people from the St. Mark's community go and see their hives there's seeing the hives at St. Mark's, but there's also seeing hives at a farm, you know, and talking with the beekeepers, because And Rob might even know this person, the Roush family, Kathy Roush. They're big. I can't remember the husband's name, but I think it's Jonathan Roush or something. But anyway, how cool to be able to have that be part of that spiritual practice, so that when you partake of honey, that you have that visit maybe in your mind at the same time, or that experience as well, to kind of enrich it and add to the sacred dimension of it, you know? So anyway. I can mute myself now.
Oh, I was just going to say something about going, you know, maybe that's something it could do now safely with a mask, is go see other hives, because I've missed not having these monthly meetings from the Center for Urban Horticulture. That's where they have the meetings. And because I'm always learning something there. They do a beginner's half an hour at the beginning of the meeting, and then they have a speaker that they bring in that's knowledgeable in a certain aspect of it. And I haven't been able to, there hasn't been those. So yeah, maybe go see some hives.
Good idea.
Well, this is kind of a simple thing, but because I'm home, working from home, and I've had way more time in my yard this year, which has been delightful. I have never taken the time to thin out my lilies and my irises. And these are beautiful, both of which I got from a friend who did the same thing years ago. So I had written down, my first thing I wrote down was, okay, thin them out and give them away. So I have to find people that want them, but hopefully that won't be hard.
Here's an idea that goes with Carolyn's bringing up food insecurity as something to be aware of and to take action on where we can. You are probably familiar with the Diocesan Ministry Chaplains on the Harbor that's based out in Grays Harbor County near Aberdeen. And one of the things that has developed in that ministry over the last couple of years is the literal starting of a farm to employ some of the local folk there who have been unemployed, who are coming out of prison, and other less privileged positions. But the point is to grow things to both feed the people of Grays Harbor County and others. So one can, it's the CSA design where one can purchase a share. Because we're so far away, one can also purchase a share and then donate it back through the Chaplains on the Harbor to be distributed in the community. So we might be on the lookout for that if that were of interest when the sign up for that comes, or if you're interested now, you might just Google or go through the diocesan website for Chaplains on the Harbor and see what you can find out if you'd like to know more.
I'm curious to know if anybody has done this walk that I think I just saw something about in Sundays and Beyond, the walk at St. Andrews. They've evidently created some kind of a path, and I meant to go back and check that out because that's in my neighborhood. Has anybody done that?
No. I know the side yard, but I haven't been down there to.
And I had it on my calendar. I haven't, yeah, but
I don't know what happened here.
St. Andrews has been developing its garden around the church for quite a few years now, and it really is an inspiration to view from any angle.
This is wonderful. I'm hearing so much, so many great actions to take and generosity and people offering what they have. It's really wonderful. It looks like we have a little bit of time left. Does anybody have any more ideas on hope? What gives you hope? And yeah, that's basically it.
I think planting a garden is always feeling hopeful. You know, there'll be another year, another season, another harvest.
I think there's an adage that I've heard, and many of you probably have heard it too, that planting trees that you know you will never see grow or you will never see seed or fruit come from is one of the ultimate acts of hope. And I wonder about that with gardens too.
You know, I'm going to say one more. Oh, go ahead. Oh, it's just hopeful. I always wonder if Rob and I should be on the same screen. So I love it that there's a couple of other couples that are on the same screen. That's hopeful to me.
Nice.
To me,
I was going to say it's hopeful. Go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, sorry. I was going to say, like the fact that things like this can grow in our garden.
Oh, wow.
Our garden gives me lots of hope, because if it can grow in our garden, it's a very hostile environment. It's a very drought-like at times and whatnot. And we've really gotten some monster tomatoes. This is our first try, and that is a miracle. And it gives me lots of hope, you know, like of gardens to come, you know.
Those are stunning.
It's huge. It's been just a bumper crop year for tomatoes. I mean, in Washington State, you know, of all places. But anyway, it gives me hope.
Well, now I'm jealous because we always try to plant tomatoes and have very little luck. And this year we didn't have a chance to plant tomatoes because we weren't here. Maybe we could have actually produced something this year.
We got lucky. We have our house is across the street from a master gardener, and she works at the West Seattle Nursery. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the West Seattle Nursery, if any of you go there, and she works there. And so she got us some tomato seedlings, and you know, they turned out pretty well this year. So happy to share her name with anyone.
Hold up your biggest tomato. I couldn't tell if that was. I couldn't tell if that was.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, there, yeah, right. Okay.
It's so perfect.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What kind of fertilizer do you
I mean,
use?
this isn't everything either. I mean, we've gotten multiple. We have lemon boys, that like the yellow tomatoes that have come out and stuff. And I realized, like Carolyn, your basket of tomatoes was just that one day's harvest. So I realized there's abundance, you know.
And mine are cherry. I didn't even try to plant those big ones this year. So
yeah, well, with our naivete and lack of experience, we were like, sure, we'll take those, you know. And we were
wonderful. They're beautiful.
Well, we weren't sure they would turn red, and they did. So
they're turning red better than most of the people in the pea patch. I'm watering and taking care of a couple of other people's plots because they got quarantined again for a couple of weeks. And one of them just, I mean, they have hundreds of tomatoes, but they're still all green.
I think it was that they were new boxes that we built, that our family built during, you know, I should say Dawn, and we helped build these garden boxes, and it had fresh soil, and that is probably next year maybe won't be.
I don't even.
I don't know. Sort of beginner's luck.
That's lovely.
Carrie, do you know if you used fertilizer or what fertilizer you did use?
Yeah. I don't know it offhand, but I can get the name of it. It was just like I'd have to get the box. It was some sort of, you know, just something that you picked up at True Value, you know,
sure,
organic,
sure.
you know,
Okay.
so. Yeah, but it was pretty good soil, and I can tell you where, like, we got a pretty large load dropped off at our house, and we wheelbarrowed it up to the. It was a lot of work, but yeah, so it was fresh soil too.
So you had
I'll tell
good.
you the company that we get it
Yeah.
from. So
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so I'm looking at the time, so it's almost 8:25, which is hard to believe. Our 90 minutes or 85 minutes has flown by so fast. I want to say thank you to everyone who is on this Zoom call, and especially to our panelists, to Rob and to Keiko and to Jaime and to Carolyn, and also to Lisa for you guys being willing to share a lot of yourselves and of this amazing generosity that is for you guys a spiritual practice. You have inspired all of us to go and to do more, and also to be curious and to know that we can do it. Carrie, your story about first year tomatoes is it's amazing. It's so good to know that we can do this. I want to say actually two other things. One, so I will send out to all of you this resource document that we have put together. And Edie has talked a little bit about the CSA for Chaplains on the Harbor, and I will see if I can find some information on that and also include a link to that for those of you who are interested. And I know that there were a lot of conversations about seed sharing and sharing lily bulbs and starts for irises as well. So you guys connect with each other. You'll see each other's email. And so you guys can find one another that way too. That's an amazing way of thinking about the kind of the communion of saints spreading in all of these other awesome kinds of ways that we will know that we are sharing and partaking of this amazing abundance that we all and each have. The other thing I will say is that we have one more of these sessions in the fall, which will happen next Wednesday. I will also include a Zoom link for that. It is different than the Zoom link that you guys used tonight. This is an experiment, which give me some feedback about that. But join us again next week at 7 o'clock when we talk about mindful steps and mindful movement. And we have another group of panelists. Emily Meeks will lead them in a conversation about movement in spiritual practice. And so I invite you all to come to that as well. So, all right. So Edie, I am going to turn it over to you for our closing prayer.
Thank you. I want to do one more thank you, if that's okay. I want to thank Emily for planting the seed of this series, and also for a lot of TLC that went into the creation and the curation of the resource list. So I just wanted to make sure that you were included in that. I'm looking at your picture. Anyway, thank you, everybody. The two prayers for tonight in the opening and closing were taken from the Anglican Church of Australia. And I found them simply by looking for prayers that had a gardening theme. So this seemed particularly appropriate for tonight. And we're going to end with a set of intercessions to pray for the many gardens in which we work. One of the things that we sort of discovered tonight was, or gave voice to tonight, was how powerful a metaphor the garden and gardening, those two images, are for us. So it's actually a set of intercessions that has 5 parts, and the refrain is, I'm going to ask you participation, God of grace, and your response is, hear our prayer. Bless the garden of your church, O God. Guide those who plant and tend it. Protect the young, strengthen the flourishing, and make us fruitful in ministry and mission. God of grace,
hear prayer.
Bless the gardens of the world, the soil and rain and sunshine, and the work of all who sow and reap. Give abundant harvests and teach us to share them with justice. God of grace,
hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer.
Bless the gardens of our community, the shelter of families, the fragrance of friendship. In all our care for one another, make us grow in wisdom and love, in gentleness, kindness, and truth. God of grace,
Our prayer.
give tender care to all who are struggling through weakness, sickness, grief, or change. Show us your grace at work in the times when growth is painful or when death is near. God of grace,
Hear our
Hear
prayer.
our prayer.
give eternal life to all whom you love through Jesus Christ, the true vine. Give us grace to abide in him as fruitful branches, and bring us at last with all your saints to resurrection life. God of grace,
Hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer.
hear our prayer. Amen.
Thank you all so very much for being with us this night. Let us go forth to love and serve our gracious, gracious God.
Thanks be
Thanks
to
be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
See
Thank
you all soon.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
This
Nice
is
to see you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Night.
Have a good night, everyone.